All right, everyone. Hello, my name is Dr. Tim McGuinness. I'm a director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, a government-registered crime victims assistance and crime prevention nonprofit organization based in Miami, Florida, with offices also in Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, Mexico, and affiliates around the world. And today, I have as my guests Debby Montgomery Johnson, who is also a director of SCARS, an author, an entrepreneur, a women's advocate of no small feat, author of several books, businesswoman, and herself a survivor or thriver, following her own experience with romance scams. Hello, Debby.
Good morning, Dr. Tim.
Good morning. And then a real pleasure, joining us from Finland is Elina Juusola, who is also a survivor from romance scam, is a very outspoken advocate on behalf of scam victims around the world, a public presenter on the topic of romance scams and victim support, and is an author of two books on the subject, one of which has been a also very successful bestseller worldwide. Good morning, Elina. Or
good morning.
Your case.
Good morning. Greetings from Finland.
Thank you. So what I wanted to jump into quickly was to introduce our audience to Elina, to talk a little bit about your own experience, the nature of your romance scam. How long ago was that, Elina?
It was in 2014, so it's 8 years.
It is. Debby's was about maybe 9+ years ago herself.
Yeah.
So, Elina, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your particular story, how this happened to you, and then we can go into the events that followed that, how you found your own path to recovery, and then some of the things that you did after that.
Well, in 2014, I was quite ill, actually. I was living in Australia at the time, and I was very ill. My mother had died just recently, and I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and I couldn't walk. So I had to be at home, and I was really, really depressed. And I was actually very near turning 60, and I was thinking that I'd die before I turned 60. Because my world was just confined to my home, basically. And at that time, I thought, well, I'd need to meet some people. And I actually joined a dating company, which I paid for. So it wasn't anything like nowadays, at that time you were paying. And I joined it because I thought, well, it will be secure. But it wasn't.
No.
No, not at all. So through that, I met a few people, and then some of them I thought that they might be actually scammers, because I had thought, I had been told what kind of flags to look at. But this one particular man, he sounded pretty fine, and so I started talking to him, and he turned out in the end to be a scammer. And but my process was quite positive for me. It wasn't very long, a long experience. I'd say that it took about 5 weeks before he started asking for money. And at that particular time, I already thought, well, there's something wrong about it. And my son went and found out that it was a scammer. And then it took about maybe 2-3 weeks, because I was still talking to this guy, trying to find out why he did what he did. So, but for me particularly, that was incredibly positive because through that time, I went from total depression to other heights of, emotional heights. And it basically saved me. And I thought, well, we do have to see what kind of, what's behind these scamming things and like what's behind scamming. And I wanted to know how people experience them. And I took, since I was myself, I am a researcher, I took that experience and I took my own case, plus a few more cases, as my example, and I started researching it.
And do you think that the scammer being honest with you at the end of the scam, do you think that that played a role in helping you get through the shock phase of the trauma of the realization that this in fact was a scam?
Yes. Yeah, at the end when we were talking, I'm sure that the scammers, because there were 3 men in the phone when we started talking about this, and I was quite sure that he knew that I knew that he knew.
Right.
So we were like, but it was he never confessed.
Okay.
He just said, "Oh, I love you. You are the best."
Right.
Yeah.
So you actually didn't lose money to the scammer, is that correct?
2,000 American dollars.
Okay.
I did. But I think that the emotional, it doesn't matter how much you lose or if you don't lose anything. Yeah. So to me, that $2,000, that it was there. So, and I wasn't really, I thought, wow, I lost that money, wow. But it wasn't what defined this scam to me, or for me.
What did define the scam for you? And by the way, Debbie, please feel free to jump in.
I'm writing notes. I'm going to ask.
Okay.
Okay. It was actually this emotional experience about how human beings can go very quickly from one kind of emotion to another, and how you can, particularly with romance scams, as we know, it is particularly targeting your brain's functions and how the brain becomes very, very adaptable to the scammer. And because we are at the heights of our emotions and have a lot of dopamine and all kinds of other hormones in our brains become very, very adaptable to the scamming, and we basically believe what we believe. Right.
Since 2014, the good news is there's been an incredible amount of research from people like Cassandra Cross in Australia and Monica Whitty in the United Kingdom and many others. Studies that SCARS has participated. We participated in a major study out of New Zealand. We're currently participating in a major study here in the United States on stolen valor, the impact of military scammers. Debbie, you had a couple of questions for Elina.
Elina, I don't really know your story, so if you could fill me in a little bit. When you started the dating with him, the online, what was his profile like? Was he
military? He was a military man a British, half Australian, and he said he was from a quite near town from where I was in Australia, where I used to be when I was younger. Of course, in Australia, that means like 1,000 kilometers, but it was rather, and he had gone to Britain, and through the British army, he had gone to Afghanistan.
Do you have any?
It's very typical, actually, in those, the idea that, but he had been very good with all the news And so that even when I checked all the news from Afghanistan, it's matched quite well for what was happening. So he knew things. And then also it was in 2014, exactly the time when Britain was actually taking, drawing back all the people from, all the military from Afghanistan. So it matched too, because it actually happened exactly that time.
Did you have any military family background?
Me, no.
Okay. And so when you saw his pictures, did you happen to do any of the search on the pictures, or did he have, I guess I'm getting at.
Yeah, I didn't do it, but when I started sort of thinking that, oh, there's something wrong with it, I did send his pictures and everything to my son in England.
Okay.
And he then, did a search. He did the search, and he said, oh, this is actually a picture which is used a lot. So this one was also a matter of identity theft.
Right. And we understand. We've actually.
Yeah. And also I started thinking that, well, he said, oh, I was asking him that how tall he was. And he said that I'm 185 centimeters. And I looked at the picture and I thought, that man is not 185. Particularly, I think the guy himself might have been, who was then talking to me.
That's interesting. And
that's very tall for a Briton. I'm 182 myself.
Yeah. And well, this one's half Australian. Australian guys are quite big too. But he, I thought, well, I mean, Africans are also very often.
I'm really curious that you brought your son into it, because many of the victims we work with haven't talked to family at all.
Yeah.
He's still at the stage of questioning if it was a scammer. I basically told my kids to stay out of it, but.
Well, the thing is that when this scamming happened, I have been living with my daughter, who is in wheelchair and who is disabled, and she was always there. So actually, I shared everything, the whole thing, with my two daughters, and they were very happy with me. And they said, "Oh, Mum, we can see that you're really happy here." My elder daughter said a couple of times, she said, this doesn't seem, there must be something wrong. And my younger daughter was then saying, oh, but he talks to her all the time. He calls her. And so this is a real man. And, that was, of course, so they were talking about it. And then my son lives in England, which was a good, Nelly. Yes, but we are now recording. She's commenting. Yeah. And then so they were debating quite a lot, but because I was so happy they do. And then I sent this thing to my son, who is very good with IT. And he then sent me an email saying, I'm really sorry, Mother, but this is a scammer, and here are all the links so you can find about it. But don't look at them. Don't click on the links, because just concentrate on this beautiful feeling you are having with him.
So I have a question. You said you lost about $2,000. Was that before you had your son check the pictures out?
Well, the moment I sent that money, I thought, well, something's wrong, and I did send them to him after that. So
question, when he asked you for money the first time, how did you feel when he asked?
Well, by that time I was, since I had the money, I think it went with the flow.
What did he ask for?
He asked for, he was saying that he's been going back, he will be going back to England, and this is what we are sending through Asia, or somebody was taking his package with him, and it had to go through the customs, and they needed this money for the customs,
Okay.
and then he was going to go to Britain, and then come to Australia after that. So it was like, in a flow of things, and I thought, well, that's all right, and since I had the money, I sent it.
So did you ever feel a little odd about that? I mean, that was the first time ask for me was more of, get another guy on a dating site, but the bigger ask, I did have some, I guess, that gut feeling that, why am I doing this? But I did it anyway.
Yeah.
Did you?
Well, yes. I actually had no thoughts about, it was just like a real reaction. And I just didn't think about it at all. I only thought about it when I filled in the forms, and the first time I sent it, it didn't go through. And then he started being like quite strained, and he said, you have to do it. You have to do it now. And he was like going, with a different kind of tone of voice. And that probably alerted me.
Right.
Then the second one, he did ask, he sort of ended up in Ghana. And then he started asking money again. And he was going to sell his own Rolex watch. But he asked me for like $500. And I said, you are a military man. You're a military man. If you now, are asking at the same time from 20 women $500, and it's coming, you are going to earn like $10,000 in a very, very short time. And I think that's when they were alerted that, I knew they were scammers.
Elina, let me ask you. So after this ended,
yeah,
what were your feelings at the time, and did you settle into feelings of grief or depression or despair after the scam ended?
I did not. And the reason was that I became incredibly curious about why this scamming is happening, and what was behind those, what is behind the scenarios. And so through taking my researcher identity, I basically furthered myself away from whatever happened. And then I met very nice people at the same time. I met this women's group who were a business group where we started supporting each other on what we wanted to do. And I always wanted to write a book. And then, my friend Chris said, why don't you write a book about it?
And you did, called Love on the Line.
And I did, and they supported me for the next year to do it, and they helped me a lot, because that was my first English-speaking book.
Right.
Mm.
What you went through in some ways parallels others, but part of our recovery program relies upon two basic foundations, and it depends upon the individual. One of those foundations is emotional, psychological trauma recovery, right?
Yeah.
So the vast majority of victims come out of this quite traumatized, and we recommend that they find a local trauma counselor or trauma therapist. But at the same time, we strongly recommend learning as a major component, because if you can answer your questions, why did this happen? How did it happen? How widespread is it? How are these guys working? How are they getting their money? How are they getting away with it? If you can get those questions answered, it solves a big part of the despair that a lot of victims go through.
Yeah, I think that when this happened, and when then I made my report, and I was calling the police about it, and I said, I'm talking to this man still, if I can help the police, whatever. And they said, you're never going to get your money back. And that was basically what they thought I was asking. I said, I don't care about the money. I want to help. I want to know. And I was quite fortunate at that time because the Brisbane, Queensland police had a group where I went. And I actually took part in that group for nearly 2 years.
Right.
So it was once a month we went into the police station, and they had all the whole department who was working with fraud.
Right.
And so we had quite a lot of people coming in. Those who stayed in that group, I would say, most of them were researchers and they also had different kinds of fraud experiences. And they had lost a lot of money or different kinds of frauds, but there was quite a few who had been helped because of romance scams. So we had all these people come in, tell us what happened at that time and how much people kept losing. And when I heard these absurd sums like 3 million Australian dollars, like, you know, and I have a good friend who lost 1.5 million. So it did become, it did put my own experience into relation. And, but in the end, I still conclude that it doesn't matter if you lose money or don't lose, because it's all about your emotions. And I think I am one of the most positive persons I've ever met. So that sort of made it quite, in the end, I started looking at it very humorously as like, you know, it was a bit of a humorous thing. And other people have told me that it helped them too, because I was particular, which I have what I have in my book about it. Mm.
What did the police do with the information after a while? I mean, did it make when the victims came in to report? We have a lot of folks tell us that they're made to feel stupid or terrible when they come into the report because the cops don't understand what they're going through. With this group that now hears what's happening from the victims, are they out educating some of the law enforcement folks? So
well, yes and no, because they lost the resources after 2 years. So the whole group and everything, like, you know, well, it is in the police. I know it in Finland and everywhere that they very quickly, they go into other places. And then, you know, those who have been in the group and have gotten informed, then they go to do something else in the police force. And the new people come in who don't know so much. And it goes like, it's like a never-ending circle. It doesn't only happen in Australia. It also has happened here in Finland.
Sure.
Similar kind. And so you never actually seem to get anywhere because the same happens with if you are interviewed with the media. The first 5 minutes, if you have 10-minute interview, it's exactly the same. It's been exactly the same 8 years for me. Because people ask exactly the same questions. They don't actually care about survival.
Right.
And how this is it. They are not talking about how you survived, what kind of things to take into consideration that you do get out of this, and you're psychologically are ready to leave it behind and go to the no. Or they ask you the same questions. What happened? How much money you lost? And that's like a really big question. If you didn't lose any money, I mean, you might not be even worth interviewing about.
Well, that's because predominantly they're looking for the tantalizing story that they can sell to their audience.
Exactly.
Actually doing anything. Again, I'm creating a stereotypical image here, and there are true exceptions. And when we interact with the press, and Debbie is our primary interface with the press, but when I have an opportunity to talk to the press, God help them, they'd better get a sandwich and several cups of coffee, because I'm going to finish about 3 hours later, and I'm going to take them through a master thesis on how this really works, because the greatest benefit that we can bring to the table is educating the press so that they're an informed writer, reporter, interviewer about this subject. But the problem is their editors always want, as you say, exactly the same thing.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
I've been
down to
fortunate.
2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, I've been fortunate in a way that that at the moment, like the interviews which I've done have become longer, and because I've told the media that you've always asked me these questions, and I want you to ask these questions nowadays, because they think, or they have accepted me as an experienced specialist, then the questions have become better.
Well, you know, in 2014, our estimate was that there were about 500,000 romance scam victims that year, and a total of maybe 1.5 to 2 million total victims worldwide, cumulative, at least since the late 90s. Unfortunately, as you're probably aware, the situation has gotten a lot worse. There were, just in the United States alone, last year alone, about 2.5, maybe even 3 million romance scam victims in 1 year just in the United States. The number of romance scam victims is now well past 50 million victims.
Yes, and also in Finland, the police is actually warning people, particularly now that we have also the war. It's getting very vulnerable. We have a lot of warnings about scams, also about human trafficking, about children trafficking, things like that. They have really come forward about that and put forward of what you should do, how you should get, because so many Ukrainians are around, and most of them are women and children.
And we do know that both the Russians and the West Africans and the Indians are all exploiting the Ukraine crises, talking about the Ukrainians trying to get their money out or trying to find help and support. Don't look now, but there was a masked person behind you.
Yeah, that is right. There was a masked person.
Right. Stealing from your cupboards.
Yeah.
Must be a scammer. Anyway. But yes, it's a serious problem, and they're exploiting it very heavily. So we focus on that a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people who have been asking. There has been a lot of offers for work here, in Finland and other places in Europe, where they are offering to employ people for jobs which there are not. There are no jobs, and actually, then they will go into human trafficking.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
we've seen that. Ironically, that even happens in China.
Yeah.
One of the peculiar things about the world of scams is, in the case of Chinese scams, and I have strong connections with our activities to fight scams inside of China, that people apply for a job inside of China, and then they're kidnapped and they're trafficked to places like Cambodia or Bhutan or Laos, and they're held captive in these call centers where they engage in scams.
Yeah.
Really the new style of pig butchering romance investment scams.
Well, that's what happened in Australia too, because the Indians, for example, came to Australia. They found houses full of people from Asia, and it was easier to scam outside of Australia because nobody was reporting it.
Right.
No ways, like you could get through all the cracks because of that. And before we moved to Finland, they had actually emptied one house with 40, 50 people who had been basically forced to come there.
According to the National Police in Australia, the percentage of people who are victims of romance scams or one form of online scam or another, the percentage that report is barely above 1%. FBI estimates that in the United States, it's below 3%. Worldwide, we now calculate it to be right around 1%. That means 99% of victims are not reporting this at all. And as we know, there's no crime if it's not reported.
Exactly. I get, on my page, Facebook page, for example, I have messages from people, maybe 2-3 a week, from Finland or somewhere else, who have just come across my book or read it from the library or heard me on some TV or an interview. They did 2 quite long interviews, over an hour long, so you get to talk a little bit about it. And not one of these people have actually, gone out and talked about it. So there's a huge number of people even here also. And it seems to be that the social media is very often ridiculing people, and it is that the survivors are ridiculed.
They're ridiculed even by other survivors.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a very strange inequality about financial scams and romance scams. Romance scams with more women. I think more women are being trapped into romance scams, even though men lose more money. But the women are trapped in them because, about our emotions and stuff. And there's a lot of older women who have survived their husbands, first of all.
Would it surprise you to learn that there's actually 2 peaks in the demographics for romance scam victims? One is 50 to 80 years old, mostly more men, about 60% are men.
Okay.
But men talk about it a lot less. That's why the perception is that there are more women.
Yeah.
The other group is 15 to 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
And it is actually just as large as the other side of it. It's like an upside down bell curve, with people in their 30s and 40s in the middle who are more risk aware, but at the extremes are the teens and the 20s, the millennials, and at the other extreme are the elderly. Now, you touched on something that was really important, which is something I wanted to jump into, because the theme for SCARS this week is about telling your story. But more than that, both of you strong women have done something extraordinary. You've actually put yourself in the public spotlight and publicly talked about what happened to you and acted as a lighthouse, a beacon for other women to come forward. So maybe let's switch over to Debbie for just a second. Debbie, could you talk a little bit about that moment when you were still a little bit afraid about coming out and talking about your experience, and what led you to the point of being a full-blown public spokesman for scam victims?
It was interesting listening to Elina at the beginning, where she said that she'd gotten involved with a business group of women. And that's exactly what happened with me when I went down to Women's Prosperity Network, and I was there to speak about my company. But at lunch, someone mentioned online dating, and I rolled my eyes at her, and she's like, "Oh, what's that about?" So in private with like 2 or 3 other women, I told my story. And that was the first time outside of my family I'd really let anybody know. And of course they're like, well, you have to tell that story now. And I'm like, no, nope, I'm not telling anybody. And that's when I heard, Deb, my mom was taken for $80,000 from one of them. Another one, I had been in a relationship for a year and it turned out he had a family somewhere else. And I kept getting these women telling me about these stories of being taken by people financially and emotionally, and no one's speaking about it. And they said, please, you have to speak up. And at some point throughout that weekend, when I changed what I went to speak about to let's talk about what happened. And I, at the end, came up with this story where I was going to invite them all to the world premiere of The Woman Behind the Smile, this great big movie and all these things. And the room was dead silent. And then someone said, how can I get a ticket to the movie? And I'm like, I just made that up. And they said, no, 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 there's going to be a book, there's going to be a movie, you have to tell your story. This now became not about me. It became it actually became my mission at that point was, how can I be there to get the word out so that one person more doesn't get taken? It wasn't about
one person is able to recover.
One person recover, because we found that, and I found then, that if you don't get them within the first 2 weeks of the scam, that we can't do anything until they're broken at the end. And now we've got to help them recover. And I don't know, which is, it's very difficult sometimes to make people aware, because they don't think they're ever going to be taken. And then when they're in it, they're not talking about it. And then when they're broken and out of it, then they're so ashamed and vulnerable, they don't want to speak up. And I'm like, okay, so it's like anything else that happens in our life, that you've lost a baby or gone through a divorce or a death or something. You don't want to talk about it, but when you do, then you hear from all these people around you, well, I've been through that, or that happened to me, and all of a sudden you're not alone. And I was like, you know what? I just need someone to know that I will be there to hold their hand. Because I understand the emotions, I understand the vulnerability, I understand the embarrassment, but it's not about us anymore. It's about saving, and this isn't the savior syndrome, it's about being there to keep my mom from doing the same thing, or my girlfriends or my daughters, from doing the same thing. Because if it's important for me now to tell them what happened, because I know I'll never get the money back. And there were parts of my story that I'm, very grateful for, where I did get the confession. I saw him in person and confessed in person. I mean, not online in person, but I saw a face to it, the scam. And that for me was a blessing, because it was my brick wall moment. And most people don't get that. So I could take that moment and the picture that I took of him, my brain kicked in when I actually took my phone and took a picture of the real guy. I can tell women that don't know who scammed them, this is the guy. It's this kind of a guy, use his picture as the evidence that this was a scam. And I knew, because I had that, and I had 4,000 pages of journal. I had 2 years worth of what happened. I had a huge amount of money. So that's the shock factor. And I was like, it doesn't matter if it's $1, if it's $1 million, if it's 2 million, it happens. Your trust, your heart, everything was stolen from you. And you have to know you're not alone. And when I felt that now, that it wasn't about me anymore, that's when I was able to start speaking. And one time when
we haven't been able to stop her either.
Well, yeah, I keep going.
Yeah, well, that's good.
I do remember that first talk when it was in a small group of the same organization, but a smaller group. And I was telling my story for like 5 minutes. And this woman in the front row gave me that stink eye, like, dummy, why did you do that? I'm like, oh gosh, now I could really just stop. But then I looked at the woman beside her whose head was bobbing, and I was like, I need to look at her. And that was it. From then on, the naysayers, I don't pay attention to them. The first newspaper article, my girlfriends called me up and said, don't look what they're saying, and from that point on, I have not looked at what people are saying, because it doesn't matter what those folks are saying. What matters to me is what the survivors need to say, or the victims need to say. Yep. And that's where I start to speak up, because I don't know about you, but you can feel it. When I start talking, I get so ginned up from the inside out. That power comes to me from the inside out. And that's a blessing for me. And it makes me more willing to speak up. When I get it, someone call in and say, hey, do you want to do an interview? Yes, absolutely. When can we do it? For me, it's fun because I wish I had Tim's mind and memory, because I can't remember all the facts and stuff, but I can add my emotions objectively to what happens and have them find the numbers, but get them to realize that most people aren't going to speak up like you and I do. And
yeah,
this is
I have the
why.
same experience. I have to say, I went to 28 libraries in Australia to speak about these things. Yeah, I had a whole going around Australia and talking with people in libraries, and also on TV and wherever. And the people who came, they must actually have or who come, they must actually be quite courageous to come. And I had these people on the other side of on the bookshelves, placing themselves discreetly into other positions so that they could listen, but they could not be seen.
Right.
And then I had all these women suddenly realizing that, wow, they've been scammed before. And that was the kind of, my experience, what are you going to say to these people who just now get shocked? They said, what? This is what you're saying. This is my experience too. And they never, ever even understood that they had been scammed. They were just going around, but they were thinking about it. And they were suffering. It's very, very, very interesting thing. Also, the other thing, what I'd like to comment there was that I also went into these business groups, the women's business group, where I had a full support, where people were saying, okay, we're going to help you because I definitely need an editor. And we are going to edit your work. You do have to go on. I went when I was after half a year, I said, I've written this book now, but I mean, I don't have anybody to edit it. And now I know about it. Do I even think about publishing it? They were like, yes, you have to publish it, just like you do. Yeah, you have to publish. And then I went to Finland and they said, yes, we have to translate it into Finnish. And then, it went from there. But what I found with some of these groups, they did help me, intellectually, but because you cannot make a business out of scam survivals. Mm. So the book doesn't really fit into any kinds of business restrictions. So, and if you are writing the books and you think that there would be some kind of plan and that you would be earning from them, I never wanted to earn. I just wanted all the people to know about it. It does not fit into any kind of a business plan because it's educational.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not about the money. It just makes you an expert and it gives you some credibility because you put yourself out there. I've given so many books away, and it actually brings
so have I.
a great joy to give it away.
So Elina, was your moment when you were participating in the Women's Business Forum or groups in Australia, is that when you decided to come out and really start talking about this?
When the book was published, before the books were published, I did have, I was talking about it to other people, and I was never ashamed. And nobody actually dared to say that I'm a stupid person because I would just overwrite them.
Exactly.
And I just, I do have these and these degrees, so I don't think I am, even though I have dyslexia. But still, I didn't feel so it didn't matter. But after the book was published, and I had to support my book, and also I was asked to go to circle these libraries and organize the library, organize different kind of discussion groups. And I thought that it's important. And I don't mind. I never minded talking about it because it's experiences. And I felt from the beginning that it is incredibly important to talk about it. I had then through the police group, I met a lot of people who had gone through the through scamming, romance scamming or other kinds of fraud. And most of them said, oh, I'd love to write a book about it because this is important. But nobody did,
right,
except me. So you have to sort of, because it's a bit of a, you just have to put your mind into it, and you have to keep going and be courageous in that way. And that even though you feel like, okay, I've had enough, you still go on and do it. After I published the book, I was really happy. I was really happy about it. And I've read people's books who have written, and I don't think that all those books are represented enough, not fun, but they are not the kind of books that bigger public likes to read. So they just tell the story, and it goes on and on and on, because the person who is surviving is not actually surviving.
exactly.
Yeah, they're just talking about it like again and again and again.
And I think we've talked about that, Tim, that it's important to write it. I mean, I have these 4,000 pages, and except for an interview like yesterday, where they wanted me to sit there and look at the book and read a certain section, I don't look at the story. That's behind me. And I know when I wrote it, it was very liberating to let that go.
Right.
Now it's there, it's behind me. That's what I learned from it, but that's not who I am, and that's not my story anymore. And I think we all realize that the more people's stories we hear, we're hearing the same story over and over, just changes of characters. So that's why the cops don't want to hear it, because they don't care who the characters are, but I think what's interesting is what we take from that, and the whys and the wheres, not the particulars of who, how it happened, but why are we doing it? Why are we not effective in prevention and educating? That's what I want to know, is we're trying to get the word out in so many places, but this is happening at such an advanced pace. It's as I told the reporter yesterday, I said, it's like going to being told when you're young to floss your teeth so that my dad's a dentist. Yeah, my dad doesn't floss his teeth. As a dentist, we don't want to hear the prevention part. It's just like, oh, when you go in and when your tooth has to be extracted, you're like, why didn't I floss my teeth 25 years ago? It's like this. We're trying to get the word out to people, but until it happens, no one will take it seriously.
Well, I do have two theories about it.
Okay,
one of them is our digital world. And it's going on so quickly that people do not realize how quickly the digitalization and the Wi-Fi's and what do they really mean to you, and how actually open it is, and how you are vulnerable because you don't really know all the clicks. But there's also the shame, and then there is the fact that we want to be. We want to know, we want to be good at something. And if we think we are good, you can't say to somebody that it's shameful to say that you have been scammed. Although for the last 2 weeks, I have heard more than 10 stories about scamming. Just in 2 weeks. And they are not like, I've heard 2 times. Financial scams, they are not so shameful at all. But the romance scams are shameful.
Which is interesting, because we had this came up yesterday too, with the difference between the victims of Tinder Swindler and Inventing Anna. Tinder Swindler was the romance and those victims were excoriated for being gold diggers, where in Inventing Anna, that was a financial scam, and she came out looking like Robin Hood.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. It's like,
well, yeah, and this the scamming, the program where the romance scams was, that was exactly the same story. This guy used exactly the same story the scammers are using, but he was a face himself.
yeah.
He used himself. Very weird. And it worked. Now he's the next
You get paid for it.
It's
yeah,
only
and getting paid for whatever. Like he probably is he's a what is he? Some kind of expert.
Yeah, he is now.
Very, very interesting how this happens with the emotions. But if we're talking about then real survival, in after this, like you also, you got 9 years. I got 8 years behind, and you are definitely not the same person anymore. You're more aware. You got, there's more knowledge, more education, more confidence in talking about it, and particularly maybe even a little bit of more age.
Oh, a lot more age. Yeah.
And so you look more presentable, maybe, and not too young anymore. And they can't really tell you because you're already an author.
Well, it's just important to start talking, because I feel like if we don't, they have to see that it's educated, well-trained people that are being taken, and break that whole idea that we're some bumpkin sitting in the middle of nowhere, behind a computer. The women that we work with, that I work with in particular, are doctors, lawyers, financial planners, educators, you name it. And so many feel they can't say anything because they might lose their license, even though they didn't use money from their clients. But they feel like people are going to look down at them like, why were you such a ding dong for doing like that? If you did that with your own money, what are you doing with mine? And we've interviewed a friend of mine, Deborah Morrison. Deborah was a financial planner, certified financial planner, 42 years. She was taken in some sort of a Ponzi scheme. She was mortified by that, and she almost quit the business. But she's like, I have clients I'm taking care of. They need to know how this can happen to even the most well-trained, vetted person. And that's why I keep doing it, because I want people to know that really wonderful, big-hearted, smart people are being taken every day. And it could happen to any of us.
From a societal point of view, this is exactly the same as sexual assault and domestic abuse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's 30 years ago or 40 years ago. So the challenge with romance scams, and both of you came into this at a period, 2013, 2014, just when the full realization of the existence of this problem was coming to light. That was the genesis time for SCARS as well, when I went ahead and funded the creation of this nonprofit. But I compare this with, you take somebody like Cosby, Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
3 years ago, nobody would have come out against Bill Cosby. But yet now, it's still not fully accepted, but at least it's out in the open and it's talked about, and people are not so ashamed to share their stories. We still have a long way to go. I compare this to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, for example. It's also been a generational process. When we discover these skeletons in the closet, it can take a generation or two before society really accepts the fact that people are victims. They're not to blame. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It was done to them. It was not done by them.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get there. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation today, is you both are pioneers. And of course, you know what happens to pioneers. They're the ones that get the arrows, the set get the land. But you're both pioneers in creating this climate of it's okay to come out and talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I think what gets me is the fact that, you know, sometimes what I was trying to say was that it's 8 years since I had this experience, which was about 6 weeks of my life. Of course, then, you know, survival and writing the book took another year and so on and so on. And research has, but if I had wanted, I could have left it behind and never talked about it. So it becomes a sort of like a little closet thing, a little skeleton in the closet.
Right.
Yeah, and somebody then, my grandchild would find my notes. Luckily, Kimby Mary River got up 28.5 meters and everything is lost. Whatever I had in a container in Gimby was lost. So nobody can do it. So I have to talk about it now. Can't leave it to my grandchildren.
But it's important to speak up about it, and
Yes.
we do it every day. And I've had people say, you know, you're not making any money. I'm like, I'm not. This is not about the money. It is about educating everybody out there. And I brought it up yesterday when Tim made a good comment once about when we're learning how to drive, we go through driver training courses. When we're putting people on the internet, there's no there's no internet training class. And now we're throwing our kids, my grandchildren, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds are being put online with no training in privacy and protection.
Or supervision.
And they're told, have fun, have at it, learn, you know, don't talk to strangers.
And yet they can't even play in a playground without meticulous supervision by their parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is the problem. That is a big problem, because, and it's coming to us so quickly. All these, you know, digitalization and all the, well, you see it with the Ukrainian war, the first war where everybody has a phone. Everyone takes pictures from every angle, from everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
everyone knows about it. Incredible, you know, we've never had that. And so nobody can actually lie except those who say, those who basically take off themselves from internet.
Yeah, it's.
Well, I want to thank both of you. I don't want to make this call too long. I want to thank both of you, and especially you, Elina. Thank you so much for taking your time. And
My pleasure.
Enjoy going outside and walking uphill barefoot through the snow both ways to go and get your coffee in the morning. I'm joking, of course. I want to thank you for your time and all the great work that you've done as an evangelist, as a pioneer, as a leader, a thought leader in the area of romance scams. And you had a big impact on our organization in helping us really to understand the impact that this has on victims. Today, you know, we're the world leader in victims recovery services and support services. We're certified in trauma-informed care. We have a very specific model for how to help scam victims worldwide, and we're proud to say that, you know, we help people in more than 60 countries around the world very, very effectively. I wish we could reach more victims. I wish we could get more victims to become survivors and who would be willing to speak out in public. But as you say, there's fear, there's shame, there's self-guilt, there's self-blaming, all of which is unnecessary because this isn't the victim's fault. They're set up, they're groomed, they're manipulated, they're controlled. And ironically, the thing that's least appreciated by most victims is that the manipulation is designed to continue to manipulate them even after the scam ends. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Do you have any final thoughts before we bring our call to a close, Elina?
I think that we just have to go on and have to be understand that life goes on, and for survivors there are lots of different kinds of ways of looking at your own life and writing your own story afterwards to be able to go on. Like after 8 years, it's a little bit of a thing, but still it's not something you should leave behind. You should actually access it, and you should actually think about what happened so that it won't be bothering you for the next 20, 30 years.
Right.
Yeah.
A question that we didn't get to ask. How does your family think about this topic? Are they proud of you that you had the courage to stand up and tell your story? Or do they, oh, mom's talking about it again?
Well, as you heard, my young daughter,
Right,
who is over 30, she immediately commented there because she remembers everything. And my older daughter, she is the only one who actually have read my book from cover to cover. And she feels, she said that it was one of the hardest books she has ever read. And she's a researcher, teaches at university. And emotionally, that was a really big thing. But my sons go like, okay, Mom, you have to give the plane to where it belongs. And that is the Scammers. So that's my family. They are incredibly supportive. They think, all right, it's good on you, Grandma. Good on you, Mom. Just keep going. Yeah.
Hey, Debbie, the same question for you. What does your family think about this? Is it like, oh, Mom, please shut up about this? Or is it, we're really proud of you?
Well, I think first off, Elina and I are probably sisters by other misters.
Yes, I think so.
Because we have the same, I feel like the same spirit in this. And my kids are the same. You know, when they first found out, my oldest just became unglued because he was the one, when my husband died, took on the mantle of protect Mom. And when he realized that I had shut him out, he was very upset that I didn't trust him and that I didn't listen to him when he said, don't. So I had to eat a lot of humble pie. I let him get it all out. And then I explained to him how it happened and that I wasn't going to have to come live with him. And he said, okay, so from now on, he was, he's a military pilot. He wanted to protect his reputation too. And I'm like, I had security clearances higher than yours. I've talked to the FBI. I've gotten it out there to the world. You don't have to worry about what I'm doing. Just be aware that I will speak up because this is important to me. And he said, fine, just let me know when you're going to do it. Well, I do it so much that I don't let him know. And the other kids, they're with it. But I'm like your kids, mine probably have not read my book all the way through.
Yeah, my elder daughter, she actually has helped me with the lectures I've given on with the speeches. She reads them and she said, oh, this would be better. And this is what you should take from there and go that. And the boys keep on saying, oh, it should be a film. We could actually direct it.
There you go. We'll put your story, my story. We'll make this. There will be a film that doesn't portray victims as being idiots. We will put the real story out there, but I think my greatest supporters have been my mom and dad because they were a part of it. And that is valuable to me because it's that age group. It's the 80 to 90-year-olds that I'm afraid are going to be taken because they're so trusting. And they think that phone call is one of their friends, those area codes now that are spoofed or the emails they get. Oh, these are our friends. And I'm like, stop. So that's really important. And what would I say to everybody? I say it every time that we speak. It's like, beware and be aware that there are bad people out there doing bad things. And we've just got to protect ourselves. And I love it. There's a quote from Maya Angelou. It's called, "There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you."
Exactly.
And
I agree.
That's why we are standing up and speaking up and letting people know what happened in spite of what they might think about us. it's an important topic, and thank you for sharing it on your side of the world.
Thank you very much for letting me come and join this conversation.
Thank you very much, both of you. So this has been a conversation between Elina Juusola, author, scam victim advocate in Finland, Debby Montgomery Johnson, who is a SCARS director and scam victim advocate here in the United States, and myself. I'm Dr. Tim McGuinness. I'm a director of the Society of Citizen Against Relationship Scams. To learn more about romance scams and recovery, please visit romancescamsnow.com. To report scams, please report them to the Federal Trade Commission and to anyscam.com. This video has been copyrighted 2022 by SCARS. Thank you everyone for listening, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Elina.